Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place to meet some new friends, have some great conversations, and maybe learn something on the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. And if you're enjoying the conversations here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you're watching or listening. Also, if you or somebody you know would like to come on and have a conversation with me, feel free to reach out to me on whatever social media platform you like. And if you'd like to see the places that I am, you can find them all at isaacl.dev. All right, so with that out of the way, I actually had to stop this guest from talking because we had some good content that we were just wasting in backstage area. So we'll just get right back into it. So my guest today is Spriha Tucker. Spriha, do you want to say hello, introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Spriha. I'm the Field CTO at Buildkite, which is I can hand over heart say the best CI/CD tool out there, but also a general purpose workflow orchestration tool. We're used by the world's largest and fastest growing companies. Most of the software products you've used have likely gone through Buildkite. Anyway, I'm very proud of the work we're doing here. Before this, I was the founder of a company called Aviator, which is actually how I heard about Buildkite, because a lot of my largest customers all used Buildkite. Doordash, Figma, all of these folks, Square. Anyway, Aviator built tooling to help you scale your large Git monorepos. Hence the customer base, folks who needed large Git monorepos. Before that, there's some other stuff. I started another company with my partner at the time. And then before that, I was at Google on a bunch of different teams, including operating systems teams and API teams, developer stuff, and also some user-facing, some consumer-facing teams. Excited to chat.
Yeah, I'm really excited too. I think one of the best ways that I like to start conversations out with folks is like how you got started. Do you remember when tech first introduced itself to you and what that experience was?
Tech first introduced itself. Okay. So I was born in a place called Assam in India, which is in the northeast. Most folks in India even haven't visited that region of the country. But when I was quite young, my parents moved us to a city called Bangalore, which is in the southern part of the country. And that was sort of it has now become the tech hub, but back then it was sort of the education hub. General like engineering, a lot of engineering happened there too. But anyway, while I was there in my school curriculum, grade 5 was when they introduced computers to us. We had computer labs as a class we could take. And we'd literally go in and they'd have computers available for us to use. And it was a whole timeshare thing, it was like it was a girls' school. So it was like 3 girls to a computer and, we'd get to like switch it on and maybe we'd get to, it was all like Windows DOS stuff back in the day. Sure. But yeah, that was my very first introduction to computers. Over time, they introduced programming to us. Most folks in the audience probably don't know this programming language, but there was a programming language called Logo back, which the whole premise of the programming language was there was a turtle. There's a tiny little turtle that had a marker, like a Sharpie kind of thing stuck to its tail, and you could program the turtle to move in various directions, and it would drag the Sharpie along, and you would have diagrams that you could draw on a computer. Sure. Which was, very cool to me at the time. And we had exams, things like draw a square and get the circle, get the turtle to do various other things. And I just, it was great. I felt like I could control a thing. Yeah, it was good. Yeah, so that was my very first.
No, that's fun. So Logo is funny because Logo is like one of those, for folks that don't know, it's like an educational software.
Yeah.
And I think it's like one of the, like, now you think about educational software and like, my kid is 9 and like Minecraft is educational software. Right. Where it's like, you think about, Logo, which is which at the time was a great option, versus like Minecraft, which is it's just an insane complex thing. It's like, I don't know if kids are getting smarter or it's like the systems are getting more complex by nature.
But they're also born into different worlds than Like I was born in Assam, which is, like I was not exposed to computers for a while, and
Yeah.
then Bangalore exposed me to things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So at what point in time did you realize then? So that's obviously, younger. When did you realize that like there was a career path in
Oh,
technology?
this was such a reluctant career path initially, actually. So I grew up in Bangalore for a while,
Sure.
and then when I was in grade 8, my dad saw this ad in the newspaper that said that the Singapore government would fund a few students to go to high school in Singapore with no strings attached. Like they'd pay for everything. They'd pay for boarding school and they'd pay for like flight tickets and pocket money and all of this stuff. And we initially thought it was a scam, but it turned out to be real. And so I ended up doing boarding school, like high school in Singapore. And that's where I started realizing that, there was sort of a stereotype that Indians tend to become engineers. And so
Sure.
I was very determined to not be yet another Indian
Yeah.
engineer.
Sure.
Um,
Okay.
and so I was very good at the science, like the things I tended to naturally be good at, or like math and science and that sort
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, so in boarding, like in during my high school years, there was a teacher who really liked me, and so she had said that if you think Singapore has opened your eyes, you should definitely go to the U.S. for college and that sort of thing. So anyway, so she encouraged me. I applied, and then one of the things that really drew me to the U.S. versus other places in the world, like the U.K. and I know back India and like Singapore itself, Australia, all these other places, was that the U.S. was the one place you could apply as a college student without specifying the course you're trying to get into.
Sure.
You could apply to a college,
Mhm.
and this idea of a liberal arts education really, I drank the Kool-Aid. I was like,
Yeah.
I was very taken by this idea of being able to see the world through all these different lenses, through the science lens and through the history lens and
Yeah.
through the bio, with various types of lenses. And I wanted to be that sort of a person. I wanted to experience the world through all sorts of different lenses. And it very much fit my mental model of, I'm not just I'm not just a
Yeah.
petty
Yeah.
nerd. So anyway, so it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to major in. And I enjoyed that exploration. I ended up studying a bunch of things. Like I considered majoring in astronomy for a little bit.
Okay. Okay.
I ended up doing Chinese I took very seriously, actually. Chinese and econometrics, initially economics, but then I realized the one part of economics that seems to be concerned with reality is the part of economics that actually goes out and measures things, and
Yeah.
the statistics part of economics. So anyway, so now looking back, there were clear trends even back then that I was being
Sure.
drawn towards. So I did econometrics, and then I did a class in computer science, just out of curiosity, because a friend of mine showed me this, what I thought was a pretty cool program that he had written, and I was like, I want to be able to do that, so I'll take a class. So I took a class, and oh no, I fell in love with it, and I was so
Oh
sad
no.
about
Yeah.
it, because I was like, oh no, I actually really really like it. So I called my parents up and I told them that, oh no, I really like it. They're like, yeah, go.
Yeah.
I thought you said you weren't going to be an engineer.
Yeah.
I don't know. So anyway, so I ended up doing computer. I did a master's in it too, actually, there. But yeah, I loved it. I to the point where I TA'd a bunch of classes. Like I thought it was super cool that you can turn sand into like into the internet,
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that was the class I TA'd, actually. One of the classes I TA'd, like turning like all the way from transistors up to
Sure.
how that ends up becoming, logic gates and,
Yeah.
assembly language and all of those like instruction sets, and you go all the way up to C as a programming language, and from there you can build further out. Very very cool. Anyway, so
No,
I
yeah,
reluctantly ended up just
that's
absolutely
great.
loving it, just acknowledging that, I like this is how I'm shaped and I like it.
Well, I mean, I think the one good thing, or one of the good things that I'll say about like the American style of higher education is that like it does give you options. There's like,
Yeah.
oh, but you might not have found the job that you want. Like, you could get into computer science if you wanted to, or maybe you want to be art history major. Maybe you want to get into art history. Like I've said this 1,000 times. Like my favorite class that I ever took in college was business law. And
Interesting.
and when people ask me, okay, well, why didn't you be a lawyer? I was like, well, I just like the one class.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you can like one class, or I like really like geology.
Right.
And it's
Right.
like, I don't like
Yeah.
going outside, so I would never be a geologist. So
Yeah,
like
the great thing is that it gives you perspectives to see
and
things.
that's what I'm saying. Like it gives you this opportunity to see all these other different ways. And in my
You
brain,
bring that into,
I was
yeah.
always relating it back to technology. Like,
Oh, really
and it
interesting.
was
Yeah.
one of those things where I realized, like, when I was in high school, I built a website and I was like, this
Mhm.
is it. And then I was of the age where MySpace pages were a huge thing. So like
I remember,
customizing your MySpace pages.
I remember that. Yeah.
Um, so like that's when I realized like, okay, tech is for me. And then when I'm taking these classes in college, I'm kind of thinking it's like, I remember I was in a liberal arts class and I was reading about like I was reading The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, and I was
Mhm.
like equating that with technology, and I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, well something's off here because
Yeah.
technology is like seeping into like all of these other facets.
Hmm.
Um, you
Interesting.
mentioned like the TA thing. Like I
Yeah.
used to be a TA in college, and I used to actually mentor high school students that were doing technology things for their senior projects.
Hmm.
And I remember I had a conversation with a teacher one time, like a high school teacher, because I made a comment about how everybody that graduates from high school should have like computer literacy classes, or like basically have to take some level of computer literacy because every job is centered around computers. And this
Hmm.
teacher was like very aggressively against that thought. You can get jobs that don't have anything to do with computers. I'm like, sure, but there's the better jobs and the jobs that are going to be more connected to technology, even if they're in social work, if they're in other sciences, if they're in the medical field. Like you have to interface with technology all the time. So having understanding how technology works is really valuable. So like I like that piece of it too, like the idea that you're saying you were a TA. Like here's a question for you, and I just rambled for a bit.
Yeah. No, 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 not at all. I like this
Was there
interdisciplinary.
was there ever a time where you thought maybe I should just get into the education space? Because you said you got your master's. And how I think about technology is there's like an inflection point in tech and in the computer science curriculums where I'm getting into academia or I'm going to get into the private market. And I'm going to go work at a tech company, or I'm going to be a software engineer for a company, or I can kind of grow in this education space. Was there a point for you that you're like, I like the academia part, but I also like the idea of, helping businesses and all of that? Like, was there a point like that for you?
Yeah, very good question. Um, I actually, I really enjoyed the interdisciplinary nature of my education. I think it revealed to me my preferences and my strengths.
Sure.
One of my favorite classes was a biology. Well, I had two really, man, there's so many actually. Um, well, if I had to pick, I'd pick like three, I guess, and then slowly increasing the number. But yeah, there's a biology class that that taught us about diseases and how we as a species are now trying to build how we're trying to combat all the things that tend to kill human beings.
Sure.
And we had a very good medical school as part in the university, and so we'd get the first part of the course was talking about how human bodies should generally work, and then the second part of the course was the diseases, and the third part was what we're doing about the diseases. So normal bodies, diseases, and then what we're doing. All of those parts. When you see how we're actually solving these like on the edge the real problems, they all tend to be interdisciplinary anyway.
Yeah.
You need engineering, you need a good understanding of human systems, you need a good understanding of biology, you need all these different things to come together to really deliver a solution at the end of the day
Yeah.
to human beings' problems. So that was really great. The reason I bring that up is my other favorite class was a class that um, it was it was like I want to say 10 students in the class with the professor, and the professor would give us these games every couple of weeks. So every 2 weeks we'd get a new game, and for that week we'd have to go and program agents to play that game. This was pre-AI stuff.
Sure. Sure.
We'll program agents we'd be divided into groups, and each group would have to program an agent that could play the game and win it against the other agents in the group. And we could use anything we wanted. We could use all sorts of systems thinking. We could use like I'd take a bunch of statistics classes, so my agents would look for data from as much data as we could get from the system. And anyway, there's a bunch of different ways you could see how the agents that different students wrote and that different groups wrote revealed how they tended to think about problems. And that was really it ended up being one of my most fun classes. So we'd do that for a week, and then the next week we'd come back, and then we'd have the agents face off, and then we'd do an analysis of like what actually worked, and why did Isaac's agents win against Spriha's one. So what did his team do better? And so that was one of my other really really favorite classes. Third one was a history class, but I really actually the third one was a class on World War II, and how we won the war. Like how the West won the war. Also very interdisciplinary. Like there are information sciences. There's all these things that need to come together. And I realized, the most impactful things I can do with my life are going to be at the edge of different fields.
Yeah.
And so I really liked this idea of going out there and seeing what it's academia never really wasn't an explicit draw to me. I did a combined master's undergrad thing, and so it wasn't like like I applied to grad school.
Yeah, sure. No,
yeah.
Sure.
But I mean, now looking back, there have been times when I was like, man, I really enjoyed university so much. I'd love to go back and at some point,
be
just
a adjunct professor or something like that. Yeah.
Just enjoy it like that. Yeah, like I love the environment and stuff. But I think it's very fun to be on the edge of different things.
Sure.
I mean, my career has taken me that way too. I tried a bunch of different internships and stuff. I was a quant trader for a little bit. I was a bunch of different things. But yeah, I think being interdisciplinary has been a very good I have noticed that I like doing it.
Yeah. You like sitting on the edges of different things and figuring out how to connect pieces. So I mean, you said a lot there that I want to kind of try to first off, the quant trader thing, we can throw that to the side because I need to hear about that at some point.
Yeah.
But you said something about the interdisciplinary thing and solving problems was more interesting to you than other facets. And I've said this a few times, like I couldn't make it in computer science because I just didn't enjoy like the very, I guess, methodical way computer science curriculums in universities are laid out. Like my big thing was like, I want to build like an app. I don't care about big O notation, or I don't care about, like very, very low level networking in C or building an ATM or whatever, right? Like I was far more interested in like connecting pieces and like the solution, the word solution, right? So I moved over to like an information systems degree, and my first class was like, basically like building like it was like a systems diagramming class where it's like you're building together systems and like figuring out the best way to put them together. And that was far more fascinating to me than like computer science.
You didn't think the concepts were like, I found that the thing with the concepts, even stake machines are like Turing machines, and those I feel like they're very helpful mental levers you can use to apply to other stuff.
I think what I did enjoy, I guess, the more theoretical classes that are in the computer science world. Like I took like a limits, like a finite state machine course, like learning about how traffic lights work and stuff like that's it, or cruise controls in cars work. That was really interesting to me. I guess like.
No, but the practicality of it is where the rubber really does meet the road. You're right. Yeah.
I think what it really boiled down to is that like I didn't enjoy the math. I took a limits and infinite series class, like math class in university, and I absolutely hated it.
But that's good to know, right? Like it's good to know these things you can like lean into your strengths.
And it was one of those things too where I'm very like visually like I'm very, what's the best way to phrase this? I very much like I get like I need a feedback loop. So like if I'm building or if I'm coding something and it's too far down the stack, I took a, like you mentioned like assembly, like I took a NASM class like with breadboards and all of that, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, and I asked the professor, I'm like, so what is a good practical application of this? And this teacher said something that's absolutely wild to me. She's like, well, the other day, like I realized that like my printer was printing the margins not the way I wanted. So I just rewrote the printer driver. And I was like, that's not exciting to me at all. So like, I think is what I was chasing, like more exciting things. And, it's funny now that we live in this world in tech where we're so far up the stack, if you really want to think about it. Like you
Mm.
said something a way back that's like, I've used this line 1,000 times. Like I say, like we've just tricking sand to be intelligent, right? And you used the sand metaphor earlier, so like you're the first other person to actually like use the sand metaphor, which is pretty
Yeah,
cool.
no, I mean it's not really, it's silicon that we dope
Yeah,
the, you know,
yeah,
like it's not, yeah, it's these transistors at the end of it. It's very
yeah.
cool.
It's
It's
very,
just a
it's pretty
little
fascinating.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah.
but I do think there is something to say, and this is kind of a question that I have for you, is that, you know, obviously in the last, let's just say use 20 years. Like we were both, we in the last 20 years we have both gone through the university pipeline, right? The beginning of the 20 years and now today. Do you think that higher education needs to pivot in the like to this new world of how people need to
Oh,
learn
yeah,
technology?
absolutely. I was
And
talking to my sister about, my sister is an education consultant.
yep,
Shout out to Sandy if you're hearing this. But anyway, yeah. So my sister's an education consultant, and she thinks about this very deeply.
sure.
She thinks about what the future of education might look like, and she works with a lot of folks, you know, like folks all the way from people who have like special needs, all the way out to very gifted kids. Yeah, but basically, she is very convinced that the future of education is really about realizing your potential in whatever way that might look like.
Mm-hmm.
This one size fits all approach is clearly um, clearly does not actually fit all.
Sure,
But now
sure.
we're slowly starting to get the tools and the ability to really maximize human potential in a way that we couldn't before. And so she's, yeah. Anyway, yeah. No, I definitely think this education in general and the university system. It depends. Like I was lucky that I went to a school that worked very well for me at the end of the day. I went to the University of Pennsylvania,
Okay.
which was founded by Ben Franklin, and
Yeah,
his
it's
whole,
pretty cool.
yeah, his whole ethos of like, you know, partly why he founded it was because back in the day when he was around, he was like, well, there's all these the other schools that exist are very theology based. You know, they're meant
Yeah, yeah,
for um, for basically studying religion. And he's like, well, if I wanted to learn French, um, and I went to one of these schools, they would teach me Latin first, and then they'd teach me French. Um, I'd love to be able to learn French, get good at it a little bit, you know, get some practical experience with it.
yeah,
And then that way, that keeps me more motivated because half the folks who are trying to learn French that don't even get to the Latin bits. And so why,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
just
yeah.
be like, increase that feedback loop, basically. And that ethos, and that plus the interdisciplinary nature of it. Like he was very convinced. He was a very interdisciplinary person himself, and he's got I'd encourage folks to read his autobiography. It's a wild, wild life, man.
Oh, for sure. Like it's funny. It's funny. Ben Franklin. Mike, there's a kids podcast called Young Ben Franklin, and it
Okay.
basically follows around like young Benjamin Franklin, like going through all of his things as a young person, and it's for kids. But I'm listening to it. I'm like, this is actually very, very
Well, it's
this
just like,
entertaining.
yeah,
Like,
I mean, he had his, he definitely had his flaws for sure,
oh,
you know.
sure, sure, sure.
But what an interesting, and yeah, and the university definitely reflected that. You know, to
Yeah,
this, it was very easy to do interdisciplinary things, and yeah, I really would. If you're listening to this and you feel like you're someone like me and you're considering going to Penn, I would highly recommend it. Actually, I liked it. There are
yeah,
folks who went in, you know, took a lot of stress and stuff. But if you don't stress out about things too much, but like you just go there and actually genuinely try to
yeah.
educate yourself, the university will absolutely let you do it. But anyway, I was lucky in that sense. But um, I think if you feel like you're in a system where you're just, you know, another brick in the wall,
Yeah.
like Pink Floyd would say, uh, you definitely get yourself out. I mean, there's tools out there, there's courses out there, there's
Yeah.
people like reach out. Yeah, you've got one life. Go
Sure.
live it the way you want to live it. You know,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I mean, I can relate to all of that. Like, and you mentioned, some of the classes that you took at university. I can't imagine, at least, being able like the use the game one, which immediately I was like, okay, so like, I don't know what time frame this, but like AlphaGo is very much like a thing, right?
Yes,
And
exactly.
like
So this
the
is,
ability, it's like you're building basically like other versions of AlphaGo for other games, which is pretty cool. For folks that
yeah,
don't know AlphaGo, there's a game that's been around for thousands of years called Go that people play like everywhere. And Google, like they put a lot of money into this entity called DeepMind, which basically the whole point was like to build like the smartest version of AlphaGo, like the smartest version of a Go player they could. And they called it AlphaGo. Anyway, that's the history lesson. But like the idea of like um, being able to like figure out systems that play games, that's like super fascinating to me. Like I'd imagine for you too, like somebody who likes that interdisciplinary work and also like highly technical, I imagine that was like the best class you could have ever taken as somebody who was like
Oh
curious
yeah.
about being in computer science.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, like when when our agents would win, we'd have a fun time analyzing why, and
Yeah,
we'd also have a fun time. Like I also really enjoyed working with other students in the class,
sure. Yeah.
and they were all really smart, and they brought a different a different perspective to things. I'd bring my like statistics-y way of thinking, and like my CS education was different than theirs because you could pick different electives to shape your degree. And so depending on what you took, like I took a bunch of networking classes. I remember you're saying like you didn't really like a bunch of, but I liked a bunch of like
There's
stuff.
some people that like it, some people that don't, right?
Exactly.
Like,
I was
yeah.
curious about like, wait, how do these things communicate with each other? Turns out they're just protocols all the way down, and like anyway, like we just decided that this is how they're going to communicate, and then we write a client, we write a server. Like MCP these days is now like that.
Yeah.
Like we're
Oh, yeah.
teaching the
Oh, sure. Like
yeah.
it's funny how there's like there's cycles to everything, and like we can talk about AI in a bit. I just
Yeah.
it was very fascinating to me. Like you mentioned something. I always go back. It's like I don't know if you've ever been asked this question during an interview. Like you get asked like, how does the internet work,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
I've done this a few times, so I know the answer. But it's very very funny how the way if you phrase your answer a particular way, it pisses people off.
Oh yeah.
Like depending on where they are in the stack or when they learned, because some
Oh
people want to go like all the way down to like the packet level and all of that sort of stuff, and then some people it's like okay, it's just a bunch of routers and switches and that sort of thing, right? Like
yeah.
depending on like where
Mm.
they learn themselves. But I think it's like with any
You know,
interview, like go ahead.
fun fact. You this is something I learned over. Yeah, fun fact is there is an IP over carrier pigeons protocol too. Like literally, the
Sure.
internet protocol can be implemented. There's a
Yeah,
Wikipedia
that's
article
fun.
about it. Yeah, it's hilarious. Yeah, yeah. It's like we've just decided that this is how things should work, and this is how we've. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very cool. It's very
Like
cool.
the idea of standards is pretty interesting, and like you're even seeing it right now, like the MCP stuff you mentioned. It's like we're right
Yeah,
now building like this new communication protocol that's going to be used by everything, right?
yeah,
Like,
and
and
it's very
somebody asked me
cool.
like, "What is MCP?" And I'm like, it's just think of it as like the new version of REST." That was like a very like really gross summarization of it, and they kind of dawned on us. Okay, so I'm calling all these different things to do these different things. Okay, so there's just a bunch of REST APIs. I'm like, yeah, sort of, but just think of them like that. Um,
Yeah, the way I've been thinking about them is um, at the core of the protocol is what I think of as nouns and verbs and
yeah,
instructions. And so the nouns are the things you've got access to, which is the resources. So MCP has like resources, I think tools, and
yep,
then
tools, yep,
prompts are is the if you look at the actual protocol, the client expects to get these things, and then the server is expected to
yep.
produce these things. And that's just how they communicate. They've just decided that this is going to be the protocol. I mean, of course, there's a lot more now to it too.
Hmm.
But at its core, the way I think of it is, yeah, there's nouns, which are the resources. There's tools, which are the verbs and the
Yeah,
meaning the things you can do with those nouns, and then there's prompts, which are how you will, like
requests, yeah.
instructions. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sounds like REST to me. Sold. All right.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah. But
no,
yes, yeah.
good. Uh, I think one thing that is fascinating too, so knowing a little bit about your kind of early introduction to career or to tech, right? You mentioned you tried a couple of different things, like, and I think we'll talk about like what you're doing right now, but like, what were some areas of technology that you gravitated towards? Like you mentioned, you liked kind of the underlying like hardware stuff, so like assembly language and breadboards and that. Um, what were some other things that you found interesting, like in the tech space? Like, for instance, me, like I mentioned, like I very much like the web stuff. Like, I liked the visual feedback loop of like, oh, I changed some CSS, this button moves over. I then found out that I don't have very good artistic ability, so like CSS and that went out the window. So I started to build like more like system stuff, so like backend APIs that interfaced with like the idea of like the solutions that we talked about a bit earlier. Like, what are some class or some concepts in tech or some areas of tech that you gravitated towards?
Yeah, for me, it was more problem driven.
Sure,
I thought
sure.
it was very cool to, I was like, well, what is the coolest world I can imagine? Well, the coolest world I can imagine has, digital interface, like the physical world sort of blurs with the digital world a little bit.
Sure,
And
sure.
so for a while, I was very into the Internet of Things. And that's actually how I got
Oh,
into
yeah.
operating system stuff, and I'd Google out one of the teams I was on was a team called Android Things.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
idea was Android for the Internet of Things, with our with smart speakers and smart devices and like all this other stuff, but smart displays and whatever, like the Google Assistant enabled stuff. That was one of the operating systems teams I was on. But I've also the the company I'd started before, so Aviator, and now Buildkite too. The things that have drawn me about it have been, if you think about the biggest problems that humanity's solving, like genomics or space exploration or energy or like, just um, things that would dramatically AI now, things that would like dramatically increase our experience, our quality of life,
Yeah.
our experience as human beings. Those tend to be, often there's a very not insignificant, like a very significant software component to them, because we've got these machines that we can collaborate with to do things with us. So I've been drawn to these systems in
Yeah.
general, like systems type work, which is why like the company it's founded before focused on large monorepos and like, how can we help these companies do better? And now at Buildkite too, like a lot of our customers, like we have the who's who of the world as our customer base. Like the big AI labs are all our customers. The like defense companies. There are there's like self-driving car companies that are customers. There's biology companies that are customers. There's all sorts of folks that use us. But yeah, I mean it's I think software and then even outside of that, like infra and then just generally this enterprise world is very cool because you laying down tracks, laying down infra is actually very high leverage work, because once you clear a path to doing something easily, turns out and if it's a worthwhile path to have cleared, you would have made more of the world do it because you've made it easier to do. Like I don't know if that quite makes sense,
Yeah,
but
no, it does.
that's
I
how I
have
see it.
one silly question though.
Yeah.
As somebody that works in IoT, how many Raspberry Pis do you own?
Oh man, I had a
So
whole
so this is a
a
thing.
whole card about it.
I've done this thing too, where it's like
A whole cover.
your level of nerddom is defined by how many Raspberry
How
Pis
many?
you own.
It's not just the Raspberry Pis too, Isaac. There's
Oh,
a whole
Arduinos, yeah, like
there's so many. There's all these other cards you can go all the way down. Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, I used to have I had a whole cupboard, and my partner at the time was we used to have all these discussions of how much space do I really want to
Yeah.
want for my hobby projects. Oh man, yeah. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. Yeah,
There like I had a bunch of them, and I started to like, and I don't know if you're like this, but it's like you see something and you're like, I need to have like I need to do something with this thing because it just can't be like
yeah.
sitting
And
there
there's
without.
all these
So
problems.
like
When I
I would
first, sorry, go ahead.
I
Yes.
would just like I would just come up with stupid projects. So like
Yes,
like
exactly. That's exactly what I was gonna say. Like, the level of stupidity of my projects is like, I'd love to hear yours. What did you
So
build?
I mean, I most of them are dumb. Like I have like I have Pi-hole, like which is kind of like a thing that it helps filter out like ads like on your home network.
Oh, that's
So
neat.
like basically like all of your internet traffic gets routed
Yeah.
through it because it's like a DNS, and it basically filters
Right.
out trash.
Yeah.
Um the one that is really cool that I actually like, my wife was like, "Okay, that's awesome." Is for Christmas last year for our kids, we built them an arcade
Nice.
with a Pi arcade. I can't remember what Pi game I think or whatever it's called.
Cool.
But yeah, like they have like a little arcade and they play it, and it's got like a bunch of ROMs on there. Like the other day they were playing like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater on it. I was like, yes,
Cool.
all
No,
right,
that's pretty
all
cool.
right. Like
Yeah. No,
yeah, but it's like silly things like that. Like, what about you? Like, do you have a
yeah,
good one?
like the ridiculously silly things. Like the first time I started living with my boyfriend at the time, it was I wasn't used to folks not putting the toilet seat back down after after using the restroom. And so I built this little thing that would put the seat down, like if
Sure,
it's not,
sure.
it was just not perfect. And man, I made it so annoying. It was like, he hated it.
That's
Um,
funny. That's funny. So,
yeah, like he would beep, and then I thought cool another feature would be to go record his mom. So I was saying, "Hey, put the seat back."
oh,
I was just the worst. Like girl
yeah.
from hell, man. I was the worst. No, no, no.
Yeah, so I used
It was
to
fun though.
like
Yeah,
years ago when I worked at Microsoft, we had this silly idea for like showing some cool app, and we built like a garbage thing.
okay.
So we basically, like, if the garbage was too full, like somebody would get an email. We were trying to show like we're using like cloud-based like email services, and like we had this little cool
Sounds
it's called a
very
Pi it's called a
fun.
Pi Top. It's like a Raspberry Pi, but it has like all of the things in it. So
Okay.
like all the sensors get plugged into
The
it, like plug
hat.
and play. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
hardware stuff, right?
so
Yeah.
like we would do some stuff where it was like, okay, we put like a sensor inside the garbage can. It's like, oh, if it got too high, we would send email, like silly things like that, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, I have a friend. He's actually been on the show. Shout out to Cam Soper. He's like a huge IoT person. Like he ripped out all the electronics in his grill and replaced it with like his self-built like IoT stuff.
Yeah,
He's got like the things in the house where if the fridge door isn't open, like it starts
yeah.
saying horrible things to people. Like it, like that whole thing. Like
This is
so,
my kind of guy,
yeah. So I very much like I appreciate people that have
It's
turned
just
their
fun.
silly hobby into like
Yeah,
trolling
yeah,
their families. It's pretty
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it's just goofy, and like after a yeah, yeah. But it teaches you a lot of stuff. But I mean, now, like, but for serious work, you get to see how real projects are done and
Yeah.
how you get to be part of them. And there's all these cool lessons you can learn from from how folks do things. Interfaces, man, like speaking about boundaries. Previously, you and I were chatting about boundaries. Yeah, I feel like these sorts of projects teach you so much about how important the boundaries are. Because like two perfect systems usually tend to be
Yeah.
they need to be combined, and that boundary is where a lot of the work goes in. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. And like an area that I think of as like the ultimate boundary between technology and culture and people is like DevOps, right?
Mhm.
And for anybody that thinks about DevOps and the tech, they think about the technology side of DevOps first, and they don't think about all of the people side.
Mhm.
And I'd love to kind of get your thoughts as well, I want, and the reason why we're transitioning to this is because I want to talk about Buildkite, like,
Sure.
but like the CI/CD space.
Yeah,
You
sure.
know, what do you think about like? And I don't know, like, when the first time you interface with like CI/CD, like you talked about the monorepo stuff,
Yeah.
um, for a bit. Like,
On
when did you?
Google.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when did you realize like this? There's this whole concept of like, oh, we just don't like drag and drop things onto servers anymore. Like, when was that like a thing? Like, when did you first get figured all of that out?
Um. Well, even at Google, we had the luxury of having a very good core engineering team who
Sure.
thought about tooling for the rest of the company. And they built, there are things there are things you don't realize that you're taking advantage of until they're not there.
Oh
Um,
God, yeah, yeah,
so yeah, they built some very, very good systems. Kubernetes came out of
yeah,
there, and like a
yeah.
whole bunch of like Bazel, the build system out of there, a whole bunch of stuff. Internally, we had the counterparts to these systems. Um, I just interfacing with how the sheer scale of the code base, and yet the velocity with which it could evolve was no accident. It was very well thought through, and it was thought through at the right times. Right times in the sense that you don't. I think one of my one of the things I've learned over the years is is that like premature standardization is usually at the heart of all architectural evil. I think
Yeah.
like unless you really deeply understand what you're trying to standardize, don't bother standardizing just yet. Like just keep it. Yeah. Anyway, but it was built over with very good thoughtful engineers that clearly standardized certain things at the right times.
Sure.
And I'm sure there are a lot of other mishaps that the early Googlers can talk to you about. But there, just seeing the velocity, the fact that you didn't really need to make a trade-off between things you would otherwise think of as trade, like quality and speed, because folks have thought things through, became apparent to me after I left.
Sure.
And so after I left, we'd start, like I said, I'd started actually a different company with my partner at the time. And we'd build things. That was my first time building things outside of the Google ecosystem.
Sure.
And I realized, there's all these, like, I now have to be thoughtful about how I set up things. I now have to, people haven't pre-computed all of this for me, I need to figure out what tests we're running. I need to figure out, like, how we're building the thing that we're building in addition to actually building it. And that's when I realized that, like, so that first company, it still exists. It's called Start Playing Games. Anyway, you guys should go check it out. But it was not a developer tools company. It was we ended up pivoting into this. But anyway, that company then made me realize that, hey, I actually really do like, I do like developer tools, and I like understanding this. So that's when the next company that I started, Aviator. The whole premise was that I started with a fellow ex-Googler, actually, and we'd both noticed that, outside of Google, there's all these different companies now that are coming of age, in terms of their monorepo size and that sort of thing. But they're built on very different technology than Google was. Google under the hood was Perforce and not Git. And same thing, like, I think Facebook is on, I want to say, Subversion or Mercurial or something like that, not Git also, but a very big repository. But a lot of companies outside were now, thanks to GitHub, we're becoming GitHub, GitLab, all of these folks were becoming very large Git monorepos, and yet had the same tooling. But Git was never really meant to scale repos that large, like Git checkout takes forever if your repo is like, tens of hundreds of gigs or whatever. And a lot of our customers tend to have those repo sizes. Realizing that there was a market here for, like, all these companies were forced to maintain internal teams that were all building similar tooling anyway.
Yeah.
And none of them got promoted for, once you build things initially, that's a cool project, but just for maintaining an internal tool that feels invisible, we realized was not a thing that got a lot of, even the most passionate engineers, super promoted and, like, like, it was rewarded, unless their company recognized the of it. And so we started a company that just did this, and then we'd go around to these companies saying, hey, like, we've solved all these problems that you're already internally solving and that you don't seem to want to maintain. Would you like to use our products? And so that's how Aviator was born, and we did that, and now I'm at Buildkite. But the big lesson that, if I were to distill down all the stuff I've learned over the years about this CIC, about DevOps, this sort of world, it's that you're actually programming behaviors.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, CI/CD, for instance, is behavior programming for your engineering teams, because your pipeline is actually the manifestation of your engineering standards. What you a lot, and ultimately these tools and your practice and stuff can either instill fear or they can instill confidence. And so how you design these systems, matters, because what you're really designing is behavior, ultimately, for your eng org, and that can have huge ripple effects for your company overall. But
I mean, I think it's safe to say, like, there is nothing more interdisciplinary than trying to get developers and IT folks to talk to each other. Like, I mean, it's kind of like a tale as old as time, right? Like the phrase DevOps or CI/CD or continuous integration or whatever, right? It very much sits in this level of, like, there's a level of control that like IT and systems administrators need, and
Yeah,
there's a flexibility need for developers because
exactly.
at the end of the day, developers need to be able to ship software as fast as possible because that's the job,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, this is where I was talking about like premature standards, absolute root of all architectural
Yeah.
bad.
So
Yes, yeah,
so with that, like, I want to talk a little bit about Buildkite and how you see, like, what's your role as a Buildkite, what Buildkite does, and how you see solving a little bit of these problems, these frictions in this space.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so I can tell you a little bit about Buildkite, and then I can tell you about my role, and then I can talk about the frictions in the space. So, Buildkite, what is Buildkite? Buildkite is a workflow orchestration engine. I mean, basically, for the engineers out there, it's a bunch of agents that can run on, not agents, just daemon.
Worker agents.
Yes,
Worker agents, yeah.
yeah, they're tiny. It's a lightweight Go binary that can run on any hardware you want it to run on. Like I said, like on self-driving cars and on anywhere Go can run. On satellites and um, on GPU-enabled machines, on CPU-enabled stuff, on mobile phones. And basically, you can run this Go binary on anything you want to, and these agents listen for commands from an orchestrator up top. Um, and we make it very easy to tell the orchestrator what commands you want to run where, and at what point. And we give this is a gross oversimplification of it, but basically at a very high level. We make it very easy for you to define workflows that can run on various types of hardware at various times, on various triggers, at various scales. CI/CD tends to be, and with very good UX primitives as well, because that's the human interface at the end of it. We're very proud of this. Our UX layer on top of it. I was actually very surprised by how much our customers loved our user interface.
Oh, sure.
And just the polish too. It's the thought behind it. So like each step that you run on your agents can choose to generate a part of the UI. So it's all very composable, and you can choose to decorate that. You can annotate it with, with links to internal dashboards or links to run books and things like basically you can make it very useful to the end engineer, so that when something is broken and then they look at Buildkite to see what's broken, they've got very actionable, useful information composed to them. And that's not, they don't have to dig through miles and miles of logs and error analysis and stuff. They've actually useful stuff comes through. But basically, at a high level, we let you run workflows on at any scale, on any device, with humans in the loop, with machines in the loop, with hardware in the loop, all sorts of things. And people start using us. They usually start off by using us for CI/CD, but they very soon realize that, oh, hey, there are these primitives.
Everything else, yeah.
And so we've got customers now who use us to do all sorts, to run jobs that automatically remove unused, dead code, unused feature flags, that sort of thing, automatically generate tests, do code review stuff, like just fix errors. There's folks who do package upgrades, test framework upgrade, all sorts of things with Buildkite. So it doesn't necessarily have to be triggered by a Git commit. That's usually when CI/CD gets triggered. But we've got folks now who trigger workflows on a schedule every night, or we've got teams that run us upon different events happening at other parts of their system. And yeah, also we've got a very robust plugin ecosystem, and so pretty much any tool that you want to connect to will connect to Buildkite, and if it doesn't, we can make that happen very easily because of how we were architected. But anyway, yeah. So that's the second part of your question was the role and what I do. I'm the Field CTO here, meaning that I'm a bridge between engineering, like our engineering, and the field and like reality out there.
Sure.
So I thoroughly enjoy my job here. But yes, Field CTO. So there's a bunch of things that entails. It means being a bridge between our engineering and the customer's technical context that they live in. It means being a bridge between engineering and non-engineering teams. It means being a bridge between our customers' goals and where they are right now. It's a very fun bridge role. And it's a bridge between us and the market writ large, you know.
Yeah.
So it looks like yeah, like things like this. But yes, if you're listening to this and you're interested in field engineering work, and just generally engineering as a discipline, you should absolutely get in touch. But yes, so that's, and I think that your last question.
Yes. Well, you answered the last question with in the first question. So, I think one of the things that I find fascinating about this space in general, like, and we'll talk a little bit, like, talking about what you do with, like, helping customers and engage with engineering, is like this idea, and we talked about a little bit, like the idea of like solutions or problem solving. Like we talked about this at the very, very beginning. It's like I think everybody kind of gravitates towards, okay, how can I use technology to solve a problem?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I'd love to get from you is like, when you talk with people, whether they're internal engineers at Buildkite or they're customer engineers for some of your clients or customers, like what are some of the things that you see like consistently around solutioning that people could do a bit better at?
System interface design. So the big thing I would say here is that what I mean by, so systems I've noticed tend to drift towards their interfaces.
Sure.
And what does that mean? What I mean by that is what you tend to observe, what you tend to touch and feel, what you tend to measure, the interface between the system and you, and the system and your customers. Those are ultimately what drive the systems development itself. Like, you know, like that's what gets optimized. And so you can use this fact to your advantage, meaning that build, if you've got like classically, like you monitor, I don't know, like the response time or something
Sure.
of an API. But turns out that like your end user maybe don't care that much about the response time of this specific API. They care about the overall action at which they do things. Start measuring that as well. And put that up there. Or if you're trying to design an engineering system like a CI/CD pipeline, that is actually an encapsulation of your engineering standards. And so use that to your advantage, you know, like put in the standards that you want in place because that's what's going to be tested. Those interface, like if you start, if turns out response time is in fact important to you, put that in the standards because that's what people will test for. You know, so you can use the fact that systems tend to drift towards their interfaces to your advantage. And I think this is something that folks can learn and can take advantage of. Yes.
Yeah, I you know, I think especially now where we live in this world where I think we're starting to drift, to use your word, as to like a lot of the interfaces that we engage with are text boxes, right? So
at the moment,
right. I'd love to. I mean,
they'll become other stuff.
I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on that, right? Like we talked about, like we talked a little bit about like prompts, and we talked a little bit about MCPs and things like that. But for a huge swath of humans like that aren't in tech, like a lot of the interfacing that we see now is a text box, whether it's searching using like your search platform or YouTube or whatever, or if you're using prompts to get answers to your questions. Like what do you see as like the ideal world that we live in? Because I think that a prompt is great, but like there's so much more than that needs to be made available to folks than just like, oh, you put a prompt and then like upload an image. Right? Like I guess my point that I'm trying to make is like,
very good question.
Are we starting to drift where it's like, this is gonna sound terrible, like mindless people that just are completely dependent on like a text box?
Okay. So the best interfaces are ones that don't feel like an interface at all, right? Like basically, you asked about my ideal interface, and the ideal interfaces are things that take advantage of what already feels natural, which is how they tend to disappear. And so if I'm trying to visually search for things or try to identify things, whatever, like maybe a visual image oriented interface is easier, more like easier than a text. text box. Like Shazam was great because they nailed the, like you could just get the phone to listen to the audio and it'll detect thing. It wasn't text based, because that would have been, imagine trying to guess a song by like prompt, like by texting it out. That would have been great.
The many times that I've Googled like not the 100% accurate song lyrics in an attempt to figure out a song, that's a terrible experience, right? Like,
right.
Anyway, I interrupted you.
They tend to be a mixture of things too. They tend to be a mixture of modalities in the sense that if you want to be able to dictate but also add punctuations in as you're typing, so maybe there's a mixture of things that you want. So I think the future of interfaces is actually a more composable world, where you tend to be able to compose the kinds of interfaces you want for the job at hand. In fact, Fuchsia, back in the day, the operating system team at the very end I was on, they thought quite a lot about composable interfaces. But yeah, you want the right interfaces for the job to be done. But there is a subtle, what you hinted at, Isaac, about text boxes becoming a thing. It's important. Like, I think the interfaces and the behaviors also start shaping you as a consumer after, like in a weird way. With enough exposure, you start feeling like that's natural as well, and so you can take advantage of those things. But that requires consistency. For engineering, for instance, if you start setting a goal for your engineers that, okay, yes, API response time needs to be whatever, or all tests need to run within, I don't know, like 30 seconds or something, or like 10 seconds or whatever. After a while, that starts becoming second nature to start testing for. Like, you will make sure that your engineers will start making sure that they'll write tests in 10 seconds or less, because that's just constantly being measured for. So the interfaces shape you, but if you're designing an interface, take advantage of what's already natural.
I mean, it's a fascinating area to think about too. Like, I can just use like my wife, for example. Like, my wife is she's a paraeducator. She works with elementary students, and like she knows how these sort of like ChatGPT or Claude, like she knows how these things work better than I do. Because I'm thinking about them from like a technical perspective, and she's thinking of them from like a user perspective.
That's exactly right.
And she'll say something, and I'm like, "What do you mean?" Like, and she's like, "No, if you do this, this, and this." And she's like, because she was talking to me about custom GPTs, and she's like, if you string a bunch of them together, like you get like really good answers. And I'm like, interesting. Like, you're just like you're parsing prompts through other GPTs to get an answer, because in my head I'm just like, oh well, you would just build like one GPT that does all of them. And she's like thinking about it from like an MCP perspective, kind of like, but without really thinking about it. It's like, I need to call this and then this and then this to get my answer. So it was pretty fascinating, like user experience, right?
And that's the ultimate, exactly, like thinking about it from the user's perspective is where is all these what tends to make or break products. Partly why Buildkite has succeeded. But
I mean, this conversation has been great, and I want to be mindful of your time as we reach the top of the hour. This conversation has been awesome, and I highly recommend folks to go check out Buildkite. There'll be a link to it in the show notes, and also like if you just want to follow along like Spriha and what she's working on, like there'll be some links to some different places to find her. One of those places is X, so you can find her at Spriha Tucker, SPRIHATUCKER, and the link will be down there below in case I said that too fast. So before we sign off, my friend, do you have any parting words or things you'd like to say?
Well, let's just end with the main thing that I was talking about here, that like systems tend to drift towards their interfaces. So you can program human behavior through the interfaces and the pipeline. Like with CI/CD, you can encapsulate engineering practices. You can shape organizations through tooling and through process like this. But yes, I guess that's what I'll end with. Systems tend to drift towards their interfaces is what I'll end with.
I cannot agree more. Like it's fascinating that we live in this world where at the end of the day, the user is king or queen, right? If the user doesn't like their experience, they'll find some other experience, right? So, thinking about it from that perspective is really, really important. And I want to thank you so much for your time, Spriha, and thanks you folks for tuning in live with me. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And my name is Isaac Levin. This has been Coffee and Open Source, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Enjoy your day, everybody. Bye.